I find it fascinating that when I look at the back end of this podcast behind the scenes, of all the many thousands of people who listen to this show every single month, so few of them have actually hit that follow button, and even fewer have ever left us a rating or a review. If you enjoy the podcast and you get value out of it, then I would ask that you do us a solid and just take a small moment to hit that follow button. And if you want to go just one little step further, take a second to rate and review the show. It means nothing to you, but it means everything to me. And you just taking a small amount of your time to support the show is going to allow me to expand the reach of this podcast, bring it to more and more people, and continue to bring you more and more value every single week. So wherever you are right now, just take one moment, tap that follow button, and if you want to go just a little step further, leave us a rating and a review. Thank you so much for listening in and supporting the show. Thank you for being here today, and let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome back to the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler here. Pleasure to be on with you today. As always, look forward to diving in. I have a powerful episode lined up today. And today we're talking about why anxious women push love away. Or more specifically than that, because I think, yes, while a lot of women are probably listening to this and a lot of women will relate to this, I think this can be expanded to anyone who experiences anxious attachment, right? So man, woman, or otherwise, I think anybody who experiences anxious attachment will be able to really relate to what we're talking about today. And it can be surprising, the things we're going to cover in today's conversation, because those of us who experience anxious attachment, I've had periods of my life where I've definitely experienced very anxious patterns. I've also had periods of my life where I've experienced very avoidant patterns. So I think I can, speak into both perspectives in a pretty powerful way. But those of us who experience anxious attachment have a way of feeling and believing that we really want love and we're really ready for it. And so that's why I'm addressing this episode to those of us who experience anxious attachment, because we're the ones who think that we're really ready for it. And while I want to acknowledge that, yes, absolutely, we want love. Everybody wants love, right? And I want to acknowledge that. But as much as we want it, we also fear it. And so there's something that happens where, there are really two sides of the spectrum. There's the anxious side of the spectrum. There's the avoidant side of the spectrum. And if you're familiar with attachment theory at all, then you probably have some understanding about this. There's the anxious side of the spectrum and there's the avoidant side of the spectrum. And there's also what's called disorganized attachment. And disorganized attachment is like complex attachment, right? And so what that means is they experience elements of anxious attachment, they experience elements of avoidant attachment, and they might often find themselves vacillating from one extreme to the other. And all of these, so anxious, avoidant, and disorganized, they are all forms of insecure attachment. And so while we think they're different things, and anxious people, I hear this a lot, like anxious people go, oh my God, those avoidants, like I'm so ready for love. I want it so badly. I give my all, and all I find are avoidant people who just pull away and withdraw and play games. And on the other side of the spectrum, the avoidant people are going, man, I really would like a relationship, but every time I meet someone, they're just so pushy and they're just so obsessive and they're just so needy. And I can't feel safe in that because I don't know if I'm ready. And so like on both sides, there are frustrations with the other side. And anxious people tend to attract avoidant people, and avoidant people tend to attract anxious people. And there's a reason for that. And disorganized people will, be attracted to all of them in different times, in different ways. But the reason for that is that we attract people who give us opportunities to heal. And so the reason anxious people are often attracted to avoidant people is because those people are creating a certain context where my wounds will be activated, where I'll be able to see myself in that reflective mirror of avoidance, and that will actually give me an opportunity to heal, and vice versa. But something I want to illustrate today is that underneath avoidant attachment is anxiety, is anxiousness. And underneath anxious attachment is actually avoidance. And so for an anxious person who says, why do I always attract avoidant people? Well, those avoidant people are mirroring something in you. They're mirroring your own avoidance. And today I'm going to break that down and really explain what I mean by that and what that looks like. And the same thing for the avoidant people who says, why do I always attract these anxious, needy people? Well, the reason is because they're mirroring something in you. They're mirroring your own anxiety. And so when we look at anxious and avoidant and even disorganized, and today a lot of what I'm going to talk about in today's episode are the two extremes, right? Anxious and avoidant. And I don't mean to leave out disorganized, but the reason I'm kind of sticking to these two main categories is because this is the way to most clearly understand these patterns. And we can do this understanding that those who have a disorganized attachment are going to experience both sides of the spectrum. And yes, so for someone who does have disorganized attachment, that makes things a little more complex, right? That because rather than just navigating one paradigm, you've got to navigate both, and you've got to, identify when you're on one or when you're on the other and what's triggering these reactions. So I don't mean to leave that out, but in the context of today's conversation, what I really want to do is clarify these patterns so we can really see them. And so for anyone who's listening who may identify with having disorganized attachment, just understand that as I talk about both sides of the spectrum, you are likely going to be able to relate to both. And that's okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when I say underneath avoidance is anxiety, and when I say underneath anxiousness is avoidance, what we're really looking at is these are not two different things. They are two different versions of the same thing. And that's what I want to start with today. So for the anxious people who are pushing love away, you're trying so hard to get your hands on it. You want it so badly. You believe you're ready for it. You're reading all the books and listening to all the podcasts and doing all the work. And you're wondering, after everything I've done, why can't I find love? Well, you're not really that different from an avoidant person. Your avoidance just looks different. And whether you identify with being avoidant or anxious or disorganized, these are all forms of insecure attachment. And what insecure attachment means is I don't feel comfortable with intimacy. And so anxious people may have one way of sabotaging things. Avoidant people may have another way of sabotaging things. Disorganized people may have their own version of sabotaging things. But underneath all of these different forms of insecure attachment is the reality that I don't feel safe with intimacy. And so I have a certain pattern, I have a certain framework, a certain way that I show up to relationships that allows me to avoid being truly intimate with someone. But for the anxious person, when things get too real, when things get too intimate, we sabotage. And so let's just first, I want to dive into that, right? And then I'm going to speak into more of the specifics of the patterns, but I want to just dive into that first. So what is happening for an anxious person? Somebody in anxiety or anxious attachment is characterized by the constant want and need for love and relationship, right? Like my therapist talked about it like this. He's like, there are mergers and there are separators, right? He doesn't necessarily like the attachment theory language because I don't know why. He thinks his own language is better, but he's describing the same patterns. And so he says that there are mergers and there are separators, right? Which are great words for it, because there are people who are always wanting to get closer, and there are people who are kind of always wanting to keep their distance. And I want to just speak to those of us on the anxious side of the spectrum for a moment. So, title of today's episode is Why Anxious Women Push Love Away. And underneath an anxious attachment is a deep fear. And I think when I say this, a lot of you, especially those of you who experience anxious attachment, will relate to this. The deep fear is that I'm fundamentally unlovable, that I'm fundamentally unworthy of love. And really, I don't think that's limited to anxious attachment. I think that is the core of all insecure attachment. The core of all insecure attachment is some form of a rejection wound, some form of an abandonment wound. But it is this fundamental fear that I'm going to get really, really close to someone. I'm going to open my heart. I'm going to fall head over heels in love with them. I'm going to become emotionally dependent on them. I'm going to invest my heart and my soul and my energy into this relationship. And after I do all of that, they're going to find me undesirable or unlovable or not enough in some way. And they're going to leave me. The fundamental fear is that underneath it all, there's something about me that is just not good enough. There's something about me that is just not lovable enough. And underneath all the show and all the pretense and all the things I put on to make myself attractive and all the things I do to show how great I am, underneath all of that, when somebody really sees me, they're going to see that I'm not good enough. And when they really see that I'm not good enough, they're going to leave. And so I'll answer the question of today's episode right up front here. Why do anxious women push love away? This is why. Because you don't want to ever let anyone get that close to really see you naked, exposed. I'm not talking about physically naked, although for many people that's part of it. Some people are more comfortable with that than others, but I'm talking about completely naked in all the forms, exposed, true vulnerability, really seeing you for who you are. We push love away because it is safer to hide within protective patterns than to really expose myself completely to someone and face the potential rejection of them seeing all of me and deciding they don't want me. So let's start there. Let's start there in today's conversation. Now, I said a moment ago that all insecure attachment, so whether that's anxious, whether that's avoidant, whether that's disorganized, all insecure attachment is rooted in this fear. And with avoidant people, it's pretty obvious, right? Because they are more comfortable with casual connections. They withdraw when things get too close. And so for an avoidant person, this isn't like a light bulb moment because it's like, well, of course that's what I do. I'm uncomfortable with intimacy. I'm uncomfortable with getting close to someone. But it's a little more confusing with anxious attachment. Because anxious attachment on the surface really, really seems to want it. They really, really seem to crave closeness. They really, really seem to want to be truly intimate with someone. And so when I'm working with anxious people, and a lot of my clients are anxiously oriented, and when I'm working with anxious people and I tell them, you're afraid of love and intimacy, and you have protective strategies to keep that out, they'll often say, what do you mean? Like, all I do is try to get love. All I do is do whatever I can to be loved by someone. And I overgive and I overextend myself and I try too hard and I push for it. And like, all I do is try to get it. And what I would suggest is that pushing for it is actually a way of pushing it away. The intensity of pushing for love is actually a strategy to push love away. And unconsciously we know that, don't we? Don't we know that unconsciously? We know that, but we do it anyway. And the reason we do it anyway is because it feels safer to be in the chase than to be exposed and vulnerable, as I was talking about earlier. So the entire anxious strategy, and let's just take a step back for a moment because I want to give this some historical context. So where does anxious attachment come from? Anxious attachment comes from inconsistency in childhood. Whereas avoidant attachment comes from like non-existent emotional connection, emotional nurturing. Right? So anxious people tend to have a history where the emotional connection and nurturing was there, but it was inconsistent. And so it was kind of like I'd get a hit of it and then I would lose it. Like I experienced this a lot because my mom loved me and she was a great mother, but she was 19 years old and she had a full-time job and she was a full-time college student. And so she would often drop me off at different daycares or with different friends of hers or like wherever she could so she could go to school and go to work. And I was constantly getting tossed around all these places. So I loved the connection that I had with my mom. It felt so warm and so safe and so wonderful. But my dad wasn't around. She was a single mom. And, you know, while I loved that connection, it felt rare. And so my childhood experience was like, I was always grasping for it, right? I was like, it was so good to be with her, but it was always temporary. And then I knew the next morning I was getting shipped off to a daycare again, or I was getting dropped off at some friend's house. And a lot of the places that I was dropped off just weren't that safe or that great. And so I'd go from this like warm safety of being with my mom to being dropped off in these different places where it wasn't safe. And this created a kind of anxious attachment. The love is there, it's available, but I can never quite get my hands on it. I can never quite feel secure in it. Avoidant attachment comes from a little bit different background because avoidant attachment are the people who didn't really have a lot of love and nurturing at all. They didn't feel that there was anyone they could trust necessarily. Like I could trust my mom, even though she wasn't always around, I could trust her. But if you didn't have anyone that you feel you could trust, that becomes more of an avoidant where I withdraw from love altogether because none of it feels safe. And disorganized attachment, I want to include that in the conversation. That usually comes from trauma, different forms of more severe trauma. Right? And so our responses, our nervous system becomes a little more erratic rather than falling on one extreme or the other. We tend to vacillate from one extreme to the other. So I'm very, very anxious, and then on a dime I can flip and become very, very avoidant. I know I moved in with my dad when I was 13, and I was in a very traumatic environment, and that was when my attachment style shifted from being more anxious to being more disorganized because of the trauma I experienced with my father. So I'm saying all of this to say that the whole anxious response, and I'll just speak about myself for a moment. The whole anxious response of responding to that inconsistent love as a child. See, I can't intellectualize that my mom has to go to work and my mom has to go to school. I can't intellectualize and really understand that, you know, there are other responsibilities and my mom loves me, but I'm only responding to the reaction that my nervous system has which is I can't trust love. And so what happens as a result of that? I have to strive to be good enough for love. You see, the internalized impression when we receive inconsistent love in childhood is that something is wrong with me. Going back to that deepest core fear of a human being. The deepest core fear that drives all of our insecure patterns, I'm inherently not lovable. I'm inherently not good enough. There is inherently something wrong with me. And so what I develop as a child, being shipped around from daycare to daycare in different people's houses and my mom never being available, and I start to internalize the feeling that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough for my mother's love. And so then as a result of that, what happens is I start to strive to earn love. When my mom is around, I start to do everything I can to try to make sure that I secure that love. I try to be the good child, the best one, the favorable one, the lovable one. Everything that I am taught is wrong with me, I try to suppress or hide or withhold. I try to be pleasing and be accommodating. See, all of this is part of the anxious pattern. People with anxious attachment find themselves in relational patterns where they're over-accommodating, they're people-pleasing, they withhold their authenticity to try to prove themselves, to try to earn love. The fundamental belief is that I will be loved for what I do, not for who I am. I will be loved for how good I can be and withhold all the messy, unacceptable parts of myself. And so what's happening for someone with anxious attachment is they're being driven by that same fundamental fear that all insecure attachment is being driven by. Again, the fear that I'm unlovable, the fear that I'm unworthy, the fear that I'm not good enough. All insecure attachment is driven by that fundamental fear. But the way it shows up with anxious attachment, distinct from other forms, is that if I'm unlovable and I'm unworthy and I'm not good enough, I'm going to hide from that by proving how wonderful I am. And if we wonder why we chase love, this is why. This is why we chase love. It's a historical pattern that probably comes from very, very early on in life. It's something you learn to do with your parents as a young child. You learn to be that people-pleasing, over-accommodating, withholding your messy emotions and your complex feelings in order to be who everyone wanted you to be. In order to be that person who could garner love and approval from your external environment. And in developing that pattern as a child, the impression that you internalized is that all the messy, complex things about myself are not things that anybody wants. But if I can be perfect, if I can be pleasing, if I can be this perfect, diluted version of myself, I can earn and win love from the people in my life. And that's what's driving the pattern. Because that belief, it's a belief, but we could say it's even maybe bigger than a belief. It's more like an identity. It's more like how I see and think and feel about myself. And because that belief, that identity, is driving this pattern, I become so caught up in the chase. And I believe that the only way to really be loved is to prove myself as good enough for it. And if I'm going to prove myself as good enough for it, then what I need to do is hide everything about me that's not good enough. And so underneath all of these patterns of kind of desperately chasing love, underneath this feeling and this belief that I want it so bad and I would do anything to get it, is a part of me that avoids any time I actually get close to it. An anxious person on the surface is trying so hard to prove themselves and to win love, but the moment they start to truly be exposed to someone, all their messy complexity and imperfections start to come to the surface. The moment that starts to happen, they start to avoid. Because we believe that those parts of ourselves are not lovable. This creates a really weird paradox. And this is, I think, this is the anxious wound, right? This is the complex thing that all anxious people are dealing with it. I chase it. I want it so badly. I do everything I can to get it. But the moment I stand on the doorstep of true love and I'm about to walk in, I can't bring myself to actually do it. And that's the moment where I sabotage. You see, the chase is safe. The chase is safe because in the chase, I can present all the perfect parts of myself. I can present everything I want someone to see. I can continue trying to prove myself and showing them how great I am and showing them how lovable I am and showing them how much I could give them. But the moment I have to let down the pretense, the moment the messy parts of myself start to come to the surface and start to be exposed, I'm terrified. And so this is why anxious people find themselves in a pattern of always seeking and never finding. Always chasing, but never actually getting my hands on the thing that I'm chasing. It's because bringing it back to childhood, right? Bringing it back to that inconsistent love, the framework in which this was initially established. What I fundamentally learned was that the messy, complex, emotional, needy parts of myself are not wanted. But if I could be the good little boy or girl that my parents wanted me to be, if I could be who everyone wanted me to be, if I could consistently show up like that, I would get love. And I think this is maybe the complex part about it, or the mystery about it, is that our parents largely wanted us to be that. But our romantic partners don't. So the pattern that I learned in childhood to pander and to people please and to be what everybody wanted me to be, it worked when I was younger. It worked with my parents. It worked with my teachers. But it doesn't work as an adult. Because while we may prove ourselves likable to people, we don't earn people's respect. And I think this is particularly true for a woman dating a man. See, A man doesn't want a woman who's just likable. There are certain, let me say this, there's the whole paradigm of like having a trophy wife, right? Where it's like, okay, she's physically beautiful and she says all the right things and does all the right things, and she's really pleasant and really nice, and she never causes any problems, and she's just like a trophy wife. And I would say, like, the whole people-pleasing approach, that is the best possible result that could come from it. And I don't particularly think that's a good result. But that's the best you could hope for. Like, aside from just being rejected and abandoned over and over and over again, the best you could hope for is to be somebody's trophy wife. But a trophy wife is more like an object. She's not respected. She's not an equal partner. She's just there to hold that space and basically be a reflection of his ego. Right? She's there to boost his ego. Again, that's the best you could hope for, but I don't think that is really something desirable. But there are men who want that. And, you know, I would say those men are usually men who are high achievers externally, maybe in their business and their career and in different areas of their life. They're men who are high achievers, and their trophy wife is a part of their achievement, right? In addition to driving a nice car and having a nice house and making a lot of money, they have a trophy wife, and she's just another achievement. But underneath all of their achievements is a very insecure, very wounded little boy who's achieving all of this stuff to try to overcompensate for a deep insecurity that he's holding inside. And the reason he needs a trophy wife rather than a real partner is because he needs someone who's never going to challenge his self-image, right? He's too insecure to have an equal partner. He's too insecure to have a partner who's going to call him on his BS, who's going to challenge him to rise, who's going to be that mirror that he can look into and see his reflection that's going to call forth more from him, right? He's too insecure to live with that every day. So he needs someone who's going to stay in her place and sit down and shut up and look pretty. And be another form of validating his wounded ego. And honestly, she never gets treated that well because no matter how hard she tries to validate his ego, it's never enough because it's an empty hole. It's a bottomless pit that can't be filled with any amount of achievements. And no matter how small she tries to make herself or how pleasing she tries to be, there's always going to be some aspect of her that triggers his insecurity. And she's always going to be on the receiving end of that. So again, not something to strive for. And, you know, if you're listening to this right now, I think you know that because the people who are striving for that are probably not people who would ever even tune into this podcast. But the reason I bring that up and the reason I give that whole illustration is because if you don't want to be somebody's trophy wife, then you have to earn their respect. And so a man who's looking for a partner, an equal partner, someone to be his mirror, someone to be his reflection, someone to inspire him, someone to challenge him, someone who's going to call him into greater and greater levels of greatness. And there are a lot of men out there who want this in a partner. A man who's looking for that kind of partner needs to deeply respect that person. And respect is earned by not being pleasing all the time. Respect is earned when you can be pleasing when it's appropriate, but when it's not, you challenge it. And the anxious wound doesn't allow this. Because the anxious wound is built on hiding all of the complexity, hiding all of the insecurity, hiding all of the things that aren't nice and pleasant. And so what happens for a woman experiencing anxious attachment is any time a relationship becomes too real, she'll ultimately sabotage it. Now, what are the ways? Like, I want to talk about some of the ways, and there are obvious ways and there are less obvious ways. So I just first want to talk about the obvious ways that, like, so how does anxious attachment sabotage relationships? The obvious ways, I mean, these are the things that, you know, the typical kind of desperate, needy approach: over communicating, over texting, a constant need for reassurance, panicking when there's space or a delay in a response, pressure to like define the relationship really early on. Right? So like the kind of typical desperate, needy behavior, the inability to let the relationship breathe, the inability to give somebody space to figure out how they feel and continue showing up, the need for an answer right away, the need to know where this is going super early on, the need for responses immediately. In the beginning, and maybe this is worth saying too, in the beginning, it's highly likely that the person you're dating is going to be dating multiple people. And I don't even think that's unhealthy. I think in most situations that's relatively healthy. Now, there's obviously a toxic level of that if lying and manipulation and deceit is involved, but I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about you meet someone, you have a great first date with them, you want to see them again, they want to see you again, and they're also dating other people. And an anxious attachment would really, really struggle with that. I see a lot of anxiously attached people being really angry and bitter and calling someone toxic and calling someone a narcissist just because they're dating other people when you've only been on a couple dates. People like be on a dating app and see, oh, they just updated their profile on the dating app. Well, of course they did. They're still actively dating. You've only been on a few dates with them. You've only known them for 2 weeks. These are the kinds of behaviors that sabotage a relationship, because when you've been on a couple dates with someone, they might really like you. They might want to continue seeing you. For all you know, they might be going on dates here and there, and they might be, you know, seeing different people. But if everyone they're seeing, they like you the best. They might be on a date with another person and in the back of their mind going, you know what? The date I went on last night was way better. I'd really like to see that person again. But then what happens is, if you can't handle the reality that they're dating other people, if you can't handle the fact that they're a free being who needs to choose you rather than being pushed into something, and you start putting pressure on for them to stop seeing other people or get off the dating apps, what they feel is they feel that, wow, like I just met this person and they're already trying to take away my freedom. There's a constrictive energy that feels suffocating. And what starts to happen for people is like it kills attraction. whatever attraction was there, it dies because they're like, oh my God, I've known this person for 2 weeks. It already feels suffocating. What's it going to be like 2 years from now? And I want to say this. This is important for anyone who struggles with anxious attachment, because what so many people who are anxious characterize as avoidant behavior is actually secure behavior. Somebody feeling suffocated and withdrawing because they're getting too much pressure too soon, that's not avoidant behavior. That's secure behavior. And it is often the intense feelings of insecurity that an anxious person has when somebody's attention is not completely on them that sabotages a relationship. And the anxious person then says, I want love so bad, I try so hard, but it never works out for me. And I want to say this with a lot of love and compassion because I've been there and I know what this feels like. But the trying so hard is actually the problem. The trying so hard is actually trying too hard. These constant feelings of insecurity around someone you just met and needing to lock that down, so to speak, that doesn't have anything to do with desiring love. That has everything to do with perpetuating your own insecure patterns. So that's the obvious way. And this is what anxious people do over and over and over and over again to sabotage relationships. But let's explore the less obvious thing. Right? What's going on underneath all of this? The less obvious part of it is that I would actually rather have a relationship die because I sabotaged it, because I was too anxious or too needy or too desperate or too pushy. I would rather have a relationship die for those reasons than to have a relationship die because I was truly available, truly intimate, truly exposed, truly present with someone. And then they didn't choose me. I said earlier that underneath anxious attachment is avoidance. And so what's really happening here is the pattern of anxious behavior and sabotage is a way of protecting myself from the deeper abandonment that I feel would happen if I really let myself go there with someone. If I really let someone see me on the deepest levels. There's a knowing, and again, I want to say, like, some of you are going to know immediately what I'm talking about here. Some of you are going to need to bring the unconscious into the conscious. Because a lot of times, and it depends on largely how much work you've done, how self-aware you are, and whoever's listening right now, you may all be in different levels of that. So some of you are going to recognize this immediately. Some of you are going to need to do some introspection to really see what I'm talking about. But there's an unconscious knowing that in my anxious patterns, I'm never really revealing myself. I'm never really being seen. And sometimes that shows up as I chase, right? So I call, I text, I reach out, I try to make plans, I try to prove myself, I try to show people how wonderful I am, I try to show people how lovable I am. Right? That's one level of it. Another level of it is I might be putting pressure on. I might be texting and calling and saying, why didn't I hear from you? And where were you? And you're still on a dating app. But, I might be putting all kinds of pressure on. Another level of it might be people pleasing, over accommodating, letting people override my boundaries. So there are all these different levels of it, but no matter what level it is, the underlying theme is that I'm not really being seen. I'm not really being seen here. I'm not really exposing myself. And if I sabotage a relationship because I was too pushy or too needy, or if I sabotage a relationship because I was just people pleasing and over accommodating and let somebody step all over me and walk all over my boundaries, and I ended up losing that person's respect, I still wasn't seen by that person. And so there's a safety in this, because no matter how the pattern shows up, or no matter how it takes place, at the end of the day, I'm staying safe. I'm staying protected. And when people leave me because I was too pushy or too needy or too desperate, or I didn't have boundaries, or I was too pleasing or too nice or too easygoing or whatever it was, at the end of the day, I know within myself that they didn't reject me. They rejected my pattern. They didn't reject and abandon who I am. They abandoned a survival pattern. And unconsciously, and maybe it's, again, more unconscious for some people than others. Some people might know exactly what I'm talking about. Some people, this might be more unconscious. But on some level, that makes me feel safe. There's a belief here that I can strategize love without ever having to experience vulnerability. Right? I want you to think about this. If I can just be, this is the limiting belief of the attachment pattern, or the anxious pattern. This is the limiting belief. If I can just be pushy at the right time, if I can just be needy at the right time, if I can just be people pleasing at the right time, if I can just be over accommodating at the right time, and it's like, we think there's some kind of formula that we can strategize, that if I just do everything perfectly and I get them off the apps and I give them everything they want and I don't cause any trouble, whatever, right? Like, if I just strategize it properly, I can strategize my way into love without ever having to truly be vulnerable. And this is what we're missing when we do that, is that the fact is, love is vulnerable. Period. There is no way to experience intimacy without vulnerability. There is no way to be truly, deeply connected to someone on the realest levels without also being completely exposed and completely vulnerable. I said this earlier, but I just want to come back to it. The best you can hope for the ladies out there, the best you can hope for through a strategy is to become somebody's trophy wife. That's the best possible outcome that a strategy could ever lead to. And it's not that good. It's not that good, right? So what we need to do is prepare ourselves to truly embrace vulnerability. So what does this mean? I want to make this really, really practical. How do we embrace vulnerability? A lot of times we think that boundaries are not vulnerable, right? Like we think boundaries are strong, boundaries are tough, but boundaries are actually super vulnerable. In fact, one of the biggest ways to operate against everything I'm talking about right now is to have boundaries. Because when you express a boundary, when you say, for example, I don't want to sleep with you until we've established a committed relationship. What you are saying underneath that, right? The surface is, I don't want to sleep with you until we've established a committed relationship. Underneath that boundary is a very vulnerable thing that says, I hope that you see more in me than just someone you want to fuck. And that is super vulnerable. Because when you communicate that, when you express that, that person might say, I don't see more in you than that. That's all I want. And if that person makes that decision, then what happens is all the childhood wounds that I was talking about earlier, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, they all get activated. And so instead of creating that boundary, what we do is we say, well, maybe if I just sleep with them, I'll show them how great it is, I'll show them how wonderful it is, and they'll want more. And then we'll end up together. But what usually happens is the opposite happens. That person usually just ends up using you for sex until they're done. And often in a certain way, we've trained them to think that's what the relationship was for by giving them everything they wanted without having any boundaries. Now, I'm not saying that's the only boundary you should have or even the most important one. I'm just using that because that's a really common example. But all boundaries have that principle, right? When you communicate a boundary, underneath that boundary, you're saying, do you feel that I am worthy enough for you to honor this boundary that I'm communicating? And what a boundary really is it's an interruption to the other person's convenience. Right? They want sex, or they want time, or they want attention, or they want energy. They want whatever they want from you. And you put a boundary up and you say, not right now. Not until you've earned it. And then the question that person is forced into is, do I like this person enough to deal with the inconvenience? And a lot of us, deep down, we believe that we are not worthy of the inconvenience, especially anxiously oriented people. That's kind of at the heart of it, right? I'm not worthy of the inconvenience. I need to be pleasant and pleasing and available and perfect and never cause any problems. So boundaries are, I think, maybe the biggest, maybe the most powerful. Another one is needs, and needs are very similar to boundaries. They kind of coexist, but a boundary is kind of saying what you don't want. A need is more saying what you do want. And so a need might be, I would like you to call me and text me every morning, or call me or text me every morning. I would like you to plan a date with us at least once a week. Right? So there are things that you might need from the relationship. Asking for those needs, again, is very vulnerable because you're asserting that you are worthy of those needs. And the other person might say, you know what? You're fun to hang out with, but I don't like you enough to call or text you every morning. And then again, what does that do? It brings up those wounds. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. But here's the thing. If I'm not willing to communicate boundaries and I'm not willing to communicate needs, and I'm just going to try to be everything the other person wants me to be, often at the expense of my own safety and health and well-being, and hope that if I just give enough, they're going to love me, what I am going to teach people is that I'm not a worthy partner. Because underneath that whole mechanism is the subtle idea that I don't believe I'm worthy. The reason I'm giving you so much is because I don't believe that if I asked you for what I wanted, that you would give it to me. The reason I'm chasing love is because I don't believe that if I sat back and took a deep breath and relaxed, that it would come to me. The reason I need you to get off the dating app and commit to me fully 2 weeks in is because I don't believe that if I were to continue seeing you in a natural way, that you would like me enough to get off the dating apps on your own. The reason I need to try so hard to prove myself is because I don't believe that if I wasn't doing that and I was just me, that you would love me. See, this whole strategy is actually a desire, or maybe a need, a survival response to control love, rather than allowing it to happen, allowing it to unfold. And love cannot be controlled. It's like water. It's like holding water in your hand. The more tightly you grasp it, the more quickly it seeps through your fingers. Love cannot be controlled. Love cannot be strategized. The lie that we believe is that if my strategy is good enough, I can win love. And what happens is we lose our dignity, we lose people's respect, we allow ourselves to be walked all over, we allow our boundaries to be stepped on, we allow our needs to be compromised. And we present ourselves in the dating world as somebody of low value. This is maybe the irony, going back to the example of, when you start dating someone, they're going to be dating other people. And you've got to show up authentically and trust that if it's meant to be, they're going to choose you above the other people without trying to control their decision or force their decision. Here's the irony. Most everybody is doing what I just described. Most everybody is showing up low value. So if you show up as someone who communicates needs and boundaries and standards, and you're willing to walk away, you're willing to let it go, you're willing to be vulnerable, what is likely going to happen is that's going to make you stand out above everyone else. This is the paradox. Often we think the very things about us that we think are unlovable are the actual things that make us lovable. And I want to share one more example of vulnerability. This is maybe the principle that underlies everything we're talking about. A lot of us try to pretend like I don't need it that much. A lot of us try to pretend like we're good. We try to play it cool. Oh yeah, it's cool, casual's cool, whatever's cool, right? We try to play it cool. That's not vulnerable. Because the fact is, it isn't cool. It's intense, right? Like, love is intense. The most powerful, maybe secret to vulnerability. And we could say this is a balance of masculine and feminine energy, where feminine energy would be softness, masculine energy would be strength. Having a really solid balance of softness and strength is the key to vulnerability. So what do I mean by that? Rather than hiding how you feel about someone, and then on the other side trying to strategize and control what happens, you instead be honest about how you feel and have strength in your approach. So the feminine side would be like this. The feminine side would be like, I really like you. I really would like to see this relationship go somewhere. I feel really connected. And the masculine side, balancing that same sentence on the other side of it, would say, and this is what I need. This is what my boundaries are. If you can't offer this, as much as I like you, as much as I would like to see this go somewhere, I'm going to have to walk away. In this example that I'm giving here, there is such a beautiful balance of authentic vulnerability, communication, right? Like, I'm not hiding how I feel. I'm not pretending it's anything other than what it is. I'm putting my heart out there like, I like you. I want to see this go somewhere. I think you're an amazing person. When I think about like the kind of partner I want, you're the kind of person I would like to be with. And at the same time, I'm not a doormat. I'm not going to let myself be stepped on. So as much as I like you, as much as I think you're amazing, as much as I would like to see this go somewhere, here's what I need from you if this is going to go somewhere. And there are different versions of that are appropriate at different levels, right? So there might be a version of that that's appropriate at 2 weeks, a version of that that's appropriate at 2 months, a version of that that's appropriate at 2 years. But that's the principle, that's the essence of it. And so many of us fall too much on one side or too much on the other. Too much softness or too much strength. We need a balance of both. And you see what's really underneath that. When I say, this is what I want, and this is what I need, and if I need to step away from this, I will. What's really underneath that is the willingness to be with your own feelings, to be with your own pain, to be with your own trauma. So sometimes you're going to communicate that to someone and they're going to say, I'm sorry, I can't offer you that. Or I just want something casual. Or I was just interested in sex. Or whatever. And when that happens, it activates our deepest fears, our deepest insecurities, our deepest wounds. The fear that I'm not lovable enough to have someone really choose me and be devoted to me and commit to me. And when that happens, we're forced to really be with that. We're forced to really be with our deepest fears, our deepest insecurities. But that's part of strength. I don't have to hide from anything outside of me, and I don't have to hide from anything inside of me. That's part of the strength. And developing that strength, developing that emotional resilience, I think is the foundational key to creating love. We tend to think of love as it's some nice, cushy thing. Love is intense. There are nice, cushy parts of it. I'm not saying that there aren't. But the experience of love and intimacy with another human being, that's an intense experience. And it's very naive to think that we can just la 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 right off into the sunset, happily ever after. True intimacy forces us to face everything about ourselves. You see, true intimacy is really like looking into the deepest mirror you've ever seen. And all of your fears, all of your doubts, all of your insecurities, everything you hate about yourself, it's all in the mirror. And you see it and the other person sees it. And if you aren't able to be with that, you're not able to have a conscious, sustainable relationship. The one literally equals the other. And so, as I close out today's message, what I really want to invite and encourage is to drop the need to control things. Drop the strategy. Drop the attempts to protect yourself. Start showing up with your full truth. Start showing up with the complete essence of everything that you are. Have the courage to face whatever comes from that. If that's rejection, face it. If that's abandonment, face it. If that's love and intimacy, then face it. Because I promise you, going back to the discussion about attachment styles, this is secure attachment. Secure attachment isn't that everything feels amazing all the time and I'm totally secure. It's the willingness to be with and face the insecurity. And as I become willing to be with and face all of my insecurity, all of my fear, all of my doubt, all of my trauma, as I become willing to be with that and not hide from it or try to control it anymore, I become more secure. You see, when there is nothing in me that I'm trying to hide from or protect myself from, I am secure. Doesn't mean I don't feel bad sometimes. Doesn't mean I don't feel disappointed or let down or afraid. But what makes me secure is my ability to face those things rather than hide from them. And becoming secure is the only way to attract a secure partnership. That's the essence of everything I've talked about today. Last thing I want to say is I have a lifetime coaching membership. It's you make an investment on the front end and then you have access for life. We have weekly coaching calls. We have an amazing community. There's a lot involved in it. But what I want to say right now is I've just recently opened up a few more spots in my lifetime coaching membership. And if you relate to today's conversation, right, if this is something that has really touched you, has tugged at your heartstrings, if you know that you have some things to heal around this, and you've been stuck in a pattern of attracting unavailable love and kind of recreating the same situations over and over and over again, then that's what this program is for. And you're going to have the best hands-on support and guidance available. We're going to be able to work very closely together. I'm going to be able to support you in whatever comes up. And again, you have access for life, right? So my commitment in this program is to be on your team, to show up for you, to be a consistent anchor in your life, to support you as you navigate all of these situations. And so again, I've just recently opened up a few spots in my lifetime coaching program. If you're interested in being a part of this, we have a wonderful community, a wonderful curriculum. You get to work hands-on with me on a weekly basis. If you're interested in this, you can send me a DM on Instagram. You can also email me. My email is shane@thelivingrelationship.com. And you can email me. And we'll set you up with a call to learn more about the program, find out if it's right for you. But if you resonate with today's conversation, if this has touched you in a powerful way, and you know that there's something to heal here, I would love to be a part of that journey with you. And so let's talk about it and see if it's a good fit. So DM me on Instagram if you're interested in being part of my lifetime membership. You can also, as I said, email me, shane@thelivingrelationship.com. And let's talk and see if it's a good fit for you. In closing, I just want to say thank you so much for being with me today, everybody. It's always an honor, always a pleasure. I hope that something that was said today touched you and moved you in a powerful way and inspired a greater opportunity for you and for your life. So thank you for being with me today. So much love and so many blessings. And I'll see you back here next week. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @thelivingrelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.